So what I want to talk to you today is what we call super immunity. And this isn't not a lot of information, but it's actually, how many of you have graduated from college? Oh, okay. All right, good. All right. That's perfect. So, because some of this is complex, and my wife is always telling me, keep it simple. It's too scientific. It's too complex. And so I just, if about 3 hands went up, I go, oh, okay, we better really tone this down. So she said, just show the last part, and that's the real simple part. So, oh, you need to video me, huh? I hate to be right in front of the screen. I'm going to block, as long as I don't block you there. Okay, can I be on this side? Either side? Oh, stay in the light. Okay, all right. Try to do that. This talk really is a lot from Joel Fuhrman. I don't know if you probably are familiar with Joel Fuhrman. He wrote a book on titled Super Immunity and blah, 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 something else after that. So a lot of that material is what I'm going to share with you, except try to give you some background to help you understand the immune system so that you can kind of hopefully will help you apply some of the things that you're already learning here, but just kind of add on to what you've learned and maybe learn a few new things just for your edification. So super immunity. Now, the immune system, just for our purposes of discussion today, we're going to break down into about 7 parts. It's even more complex than that, but we try to kind of get 7 categories for you to kind of think about and categorize, because we're going to kind of review that and sum it up in another at the end. So, immune system, we're talking about immunity. Immunity, most of the time people think of immunity. What's immunity? Well, you know about immunizations, and that's usually talking about infectious diseases. Vaccinated, you're immunized to some disease that you don't want to get, whether it's polio, whether it's smallpox, influenza, whether it's cholera, and whatever else that we can vaccinate people. And we can vaccinate against a lot of different diseases now, infectious diseases. And what we don't think of, though, is immunity in regards to other things, particularly cancer. And that's the one that most people are concerned about. But the immune system is very complex. It's widespread throughout the body. It functions well in some circumstances. It doesn't function well in others. And so we need to try to learn how is the best way to optimize the immune system. Because if you have too much of an overreactive immune system, things can go haywire, like lupus. You want to form antibodies and you want to form a reaction to things, but you don't want to form them against your own self. That's lupus. And yet you want enough, because if you don't have enough, then you're going to be susceptible, like the people that have AIDS, right? AIDS, acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. Their immune system is so bad that they could die from chicken pox, or they are susceptible to some cancers. So, and that's what they die from. They don't die from AIDS. They die from some infection or some kind of cancer, because their immune system is shot and is worthless. So we're going to think about the immune system in regards to cellular, in regards to antibody formation, in regards to inflammation, to oxidation and antioxidants, DNA repair and protection, angiogenesis and its inhibition or balance, and the microbiome. So let's start with cellular. When we look at cellular, one of the basic cellular things is in regards to the white blood cells. White blood cells are a type of cell that circulate in your bloodstream, but also are diffused throughout, infiltrated throughout the body. There are many different kinds of white blood cells, and the most common one is the polymorphonuclear cell, which you see a picture of here. It's this one. The rest of them are red blood cells, but you'll have white blood cells, also known as WBC. So if you look at your complete blood count, you'll see WBC. And it's broken down into different kinds of white blood cells. This kind is specifically designed to eat things. So we call them phagocytes, and phagocytosis is the process by which these cells go up to germs and basically eat them and then destroy them. as they digest them. Then we also have some cells known as natural killer cells or natural killer thymus cells or T cells. So you sometimes see it as NK T cells or just NK cells. And these are a type of a white blood cell in the lymphocyte system instead of the polymorphonuclear segmented neutrophil system, kind of white blood cell. And they have the ability to recognize, even without prior exposure, they have the ability to recognize cells that are abnormal, particularly cancer cells. But it could be some kind of deformed cell, a cell that's old and aging, just something that's odd or different about the cell that doesn't seem to be normal. And they basically are your assassin cells. They are also the cells that are released throughout the body, and they can naturally find what's foreign and then destroy it. So the way they do it is they go up and attach themselves to the cell, and then they perforate it. So you have, this is the cell here, and it's the T cell, the NK cell, is attached to this cancer cell, and once it attaches to it, then it releases an enzyme that perforates the cell wall of that abnormal cell. And in the process of doing that, then through that hole, basically, it can inject material that leads to cell death. Now, a lot of cells, most of our cells have the ability to, have what they call a planned cell death. So that when they get kind of old and they're not functioning very well, they just have a way of dying and sloughing off. Like your gastrointestinal cells, your skin cells. They have some function even when they die. Your skin cells, they kind of pile up and help create a barrier. But your intestinal cells, the lining, when they get old, they just slough off. They're replaced by a new growth of new cells. So they have a way of almost planned death. Well, cancer cells, a lot of them do not have that. They lost that ability to have planned cell death. They think they're going to live forever, and they almost do. They just live and live and live unless some of their blood supply or their oxygen is cut off or they're treated with something that kills them. So they lose that ability to have planned cell death. Well, the natural killer cells, they do it for them. So since they don't have it, then they induce a planned cell death. And you can see this depicted here where they will have a process of which the cell just basically dissolves. So it's killed. We call that apoptosis. So that's the planned cell death that the natural killer cells can do. So those are just some examples of the cellular component of immunity. And there are other things in regards to cellular that the body can do, that does in regards to attacking, facilitating, inhibiting the cellular components, let's say like of cancer or some of the infecting organisms. So besides having your own cells that can fight off infections particularly, or cancer or other diseases, you can have substances in your body that affect the cellular function of some of these things, and we'll talk about them a little bit later. Well, let's move on to antibodies. Antibodies are complex proteins. They have sort of this Y-shaped shape. If you think this is trying to depict a kind of a three-dimensional thing of an antibody. And antibodies, this is a kind of in a model, but they also, in a diagrammatic way, also have this, they show the Y shape here. And you have what we call the heavy chains and the light chains. The heavy chains are the more heavy, longer, constant backbone of the structure of the antibody. And then you have the light chains, which are also out here, which are shorter, so they call them the light chains. But on the end of each of these two arms of the antibody are what they call the antigen binding sites. The rest of it is kind of the same, the constant regions. But you have the variable regions. So why do you have the variable regions? Because the antibodies are tailored to a specific antigen that they are going to attach to. It's almost like a receptor, and it's like a hand in a glove. It's specifically made to match up to something else. And so antibodies are very specific. They're specific for a certain thing that they look for. So in the processes of antibody formation, we have a number of ways that antibodies can be developed. One of the ways is when they do get certain foreign, let's say a bacteria, gets ingested and swallowed up, eaten, and this cell can then process this material. It kind of selects which antigens it wants to have the body develop antibodies to, and it presents them to these other white blood cells, and then they will go on to either maintain the memory of that, or they will actually become involved in developing antibodies to that particular piece or particle, something on the surface of the germ. So you have these antibodies produced that then match exactly to something on the bacterium, and they glom onto them that way. The other way is through what we call dendritic cells. The dendritic cells are your sentinels. They're spread throughout the body where you come in contact with the environment. So they're along your respiratory tract, your gastrointestinal tract, you're in your skin. They're areas where you come in contact with your environment, okay? Whether you breathe it in, whether you eat it, or whether you come in contact with it on the outside. Those dendritic cells also have the ability to process. They process things that seem to be foreign or maybe dangerous, and they have a way of also doing the same kind of thing of facilitating the development of an immune response, particularly in the antibody formation. So they are particularly, their function is particularly vital. And the thing that they have to do is they have to decide what's bad and what's good. Okay, that's what they have to do. They're processing and monitoring everything you come in contact, and they have to decide, okay, is this good, is this bad? And if it's bad, then we need to be able to fight this thing off, and so then they facilitate the immune response. So antibodies do many different things, and there are different kinds of antibodies. They do various things to either neutralize the activity of what they're fighting, whether it's a virus or whether it's a bacteria. They have the ability to bring in other, might say, aid, called the complement system. They also have a way of maybe just making the germs be more like adding sauce to them so that they become more attractive to the white blood cells that want to eat them. So they become more attractive, or they can clump these things up so they can be gotten rid of that way. So there's various ways that, depending on which antibody is formed, that will help fight infection. Then in the area of inflammation. Now, inflammation has become now a more common way of unifying a number of different diseases. Because what we found is that inflammation is at the basis of many different, seemingly different kinds of problems. So anywhere from, you think of arthritis, well, that's an obvious inflammatory state, right? However, things like cancer, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease, heart disease, autoimmune you kind of think of, because a lot of times the autoimmune have lupus and some of these other issues, and they have inflammation of the joints, or they have inflammation of the skin, or things like that. And that's kind of obvious. Pulmonary diseases like asthma, which we've known as a chronic inflammatory disease of the airways. So all of these things tie together and have a basis of inflammation. So what we want is not that much inflammation response, all right? We do want some inflammation, because inflammation is a natural body process that has to do with healing. So if you get a sprained ankle, or you get a cut or a puncture wound, part of the healing process is inflammation. That's the natural body way to heal. It forms an inflammatory response. So it brings in more blood vessels so that it can grow and bring in nutrients, It opens up the blood vessels so there's more flow and circulation, brings in the white blood cells so they can chew up and eat. Like if you had bleeding in your bruise or something like that, it can gobble that all up and get rid of that stuff, get rid of your bruising, get rid of your hematoma. It can bring in new cells that will help repair the skin structures, the ligaments, whatever's been injured, muscle cells that have been torn in whatever injury you had. It's good to have an inflammatory response. The problem is when you get inflammation 3 times a day. Okay? So it's one thing to go and bang your shin on the coffee table or something like that. Okay? And then you go, okay, that was bad. And then you let it heal. Well, what if you did it 3 times a day? You know, for breakfast, bam. Lunchtime, bam. Dinner, another bam, or double wham. So then it gets to be a problem because you're having this inflammatory response and state on a regular basis. And that's what we call chronic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is not healthy. Our bodies are designed for acute inflammation, get it done, get it healed, get it over with, done, go on, move on. But when you have chronic inflammation, that's when you're getting to a pro-inflammatory state, and this is the basis for many of these other chronic diseases. So, in this, you want to have, at the center of this inflammatory response is a material called arachidonic acid. And arachidonic acid, after it's formed, especially if it's in excess, tends to have 3 arms: the prostaglandin arm, the leukotriene arm, and the thromboxane arm. And they can be influenced by different things. Now, arachidonic acid can be inhibited, inhibited. So what promotes arachidonic acid will promote inflammation. What lessens arachidonic acid will be anti-inflammatory. So by inhibiting arachidonic acid, it's by eating less insulin-stimulating carbohydrates. That's the refined carbs. That's like your processed grains and pastas and breads, the sugars, those types of things that are refined, that are not whole food carbohydrates, not the natural carbohydrates. They're going to have, the unhealthy ones are going to have more insulin produced, which will produce more arachidonic acid. Meats and egg yolks will also tend to promote that. But if you have things that have omega-3 oils in them, it's anti-inflammatory, okay? Like from fish oil or sesame. So we'll go into this a little bit more. And what you have here is, like we were talking about, you want some inflammation, you just don't want it chronically. There's this balance. There's this fine balance that the body wants to maintain in regards to inflammation. So as you'll see here, there are 2 pathways. One is the omega-6 fatty acids family, starting with linoleic acid, which is one of our essential fatty acids, and the omega-3 fatty acids, which is the other essential fatty acid, alpha-linolenic acid. So it's the ALA and the LA. Now they both take a process down. The omega-6s go over to come down to arachidonic acid. And the omega-3 comes down to EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, and also DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. And those are less inflammatory. They're kind of anti-inflammatory, whereas arachidonic acid is more inflammatory. What you see here in the middle is in the blue diamonds here are the enzymes. The enzymes that convert the beginning essential fatty acids down this pathway. And what it is there's a competition for the same enzymes. So obviously, if you have competition, which one wins? What? The one that's most numerous, right? So if you have more of these than these, then you're gonna go down this pathway more often. There's going to be an imbalance. And the standard American diet almost has a ratio of 20 to 30 to 1. And that's why they say, oh, you need to get more omega-3s. You need to get more omega-3s, and so you need to take fish oil and all those type of things to balance that out. Well, you can balance that out by you can balance that out by cutting down on the omega-6s. Where do the omega-6s come from? Vegetable oils and grains. Whereas the omega-3s will come from some flax, walnut, some soy, chia, hemp. Soy is interesting. It's got a little bit of blend of both. Whereas animal fats and dairy and shellfish directly have arachidonic acid. You don't even need to go down this line, because the animals don't have this, but they have plenty of this already. Okay, so yes, there are two ways to balance you'd like a ratio closer to 1-to-1, but even if you get to 3-to-1, 6-to-3, you're getting a lot closer than the standard American diet. This shows different areas where we treat medically as far as anti-inflammatory agents. So like here's where steroids work, right here. They try to decrease the formation of arachidonic acid, and so therefore it's anti-inflammatory. And these are the anti-inflammatory steroids, not the anabolic steroids. And then you have the prostaglandin inhibitors like indomethacin, like ibuprofen, those type of things. The non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, they block it here, and you have other medicines that block this. And so we have ways of blocking various aspects of the inflammatory cascade. But it's much better to back up and go before that, before the formation of arachidonic acid. So how do the foods affect then the inflammatory state? You have here the arachidonic acid-rich foods like egg yolk, red meat, poultry, organ meats, or the production of arachidonic acid through these pro-inflammatory foods, such as the refined processed foods, which will include some of the oils, as we talked about, and refined carbs. These all lead to excessive arachidonic acid, which then just promotes the inflammatory pathway. All right, we'll go next to the antioxidants. Now, what happens if you're living, which all of you here are, you're going to be subjected to your environment. And when you're subjected to living on this planet, you're going to be exposed to things that cause what we call oxidation. Because you're a living, breathing animal, you consume oxygen. And what does oxygen do? It oxidizes, right? So just breathing, just existing, eating involves oxidation. And so, and then you have all these things that you're exposed to that can be additive to just eating and breathing. That's things like being out in the sun. If you're exposed to cigarette smoke, you get some radiation. Go get your airport scan or whatever. You know, anything, any kind of radiation, air pollution, all these things will promote the production of what we call free radicals. Now, free radicals, the reason why you don't want free radicals is free radicals are things that will go along and damage things. So when you have free radicals, they tend to attack normal things and damage them. So with the formation of free radicals, you get damage. And one of the things in regards to cancer especially is the damage that happens to the DNA. Because you're altering basically, cancer basically is a good cell gone bad. And how did it get that way? Well, it got altered. It got altered at its core, at the DNA level. And when that happens, then it becomes a rogue molecule, a rogue cell. And so that's what starts the cancer process. Well, free radicals are a part of that. They're a part of that attacking and changing of the DNA. So you want things that can neutralize free radicals, and that's where the antioxidants come in. So antioxidants you can identify by their color. Things in nature that have a lot of color are going to have different kinds of antioxidants. There's hundreds of antioxidants, and there's probably some that we haven't even discovered yet. And almost all of them are in plants. Almost all of them are in plants. And as you see here, the various, it might be hard to read, But the various colors stand for a different kind of antioxidant compound. So as plants develop this to protect themselves, if we eat them, we generate some protection ourselves for our body. So as the plant is protecting itself against the sun and against pests and whatever and the funguses and viruses that are trying to attack it, by us eating them, we derive some benefit as well. So you can see as you look at the foods, if you go in the nice produce aisle, right, or section, you're going to see this wide range of color. And hopefully, if you eat at home, you're going to see the same wide range of color on your plate. It's not going to be brown and off-white and yellow, right? I mean, it's just, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be attractive. It's going to be, so you want to eat with color. In fact, we tell people, try to eat a rainbow every day. Think of what you're eating. So I have had my greens today, have had my reds today, my oranges, my yellows. Think about it as you go through the day. Oh, I haven't gotten my purples today. I need to go out and go get some blueberries or something like that. So think about that. Now, you want to think about colors, but you don't want that kind. You want the natural colors, right? The natural food colors, not these artificial things. All right, so the DNA. The DNA is the basic genetic fabric that we're composed of, and DNA is really a coding. It's a code, and it is the coding system. It's the communication for developing all of the things that make you you. And it's complex, but in a way it's simple. But it's very, very elegant. And in it is compacted a lot of information. It is the blueprint for all of your enzymes and that regulate all the body processes and that all the protein structures that you need, everything that you need in your entire body is wrapped up in that little chromosome. It's just fascinating. And however, it can be susceptible to damage. And if it's damaged, then the information is damaged. So you get lost in translation because this thing is coding and spitting out instructions. And if it's damaged, the instructions are going to be altered. And when you get altered instructions, then you get altered function and dysfunction or no function, depending on how severe the damage is. So this is what happens with cancer. Carcinogens will attach themselves and attack and affect the turning on, switching on and off of some of these genes. And you have genes in your body that you've inherited or that have been damaged that are either pro-cancer or against cancer, pro-inflammation or against inflammation. And so you can alter to some degree how the switching of the genes get, whether they're turned on or turned off. And most of it, the most powerful switching mechanism for your epigenome is your diet. So we'll talk a little bit more some of the things in regards to DNA. Then we have angiogenesis. Angiogenesis is angio, which is blood vessel, genesis, the beginning or generation of. So the generation or the building of new blood vessels. New blood vessels are, again, this is another one of those balance things. You want to have a growth of new blood vessels when you need them. And yet other times you don't want the growth of new blood vessels because that's a problem. But this ability of the body to respond to things and develop new blood vessel growth is great in a way. Just think of your blood vessels as really your lifeline, or just think of it as water going somewhere, like in streams or rivers or creeks and things like that. Where the water goes, life goes, right? You don't see things growing abundantly and lushly out in the dry where there's no water, but all of a sudden you might see an oasis or you might see a little strip of green and but there's water that's gone through there. Well, it's the same way with your tissue. You need oxygen, you need nutrients, you need things to take away the carbon dioxide and the toxins. You need things to take away all of the oxidation products that have been generated by digestion or by just forming energy in your cells and their function. And so you need a blood supply. So as blood supply goes, life goes. And that's the problem with heart disease, because you don't have any blood flow to the heart muscle, and it dies. So you want angiogenesis to some extent, but on the other hand, you can have too much. So we see things that have excessive angiogenesis in things like cancer, psoriasis, particularly in the skin, the blindness associated with diabetic retinopathy, even sometimes macular degeneration, rheumatoid arthritis. And then you can have insufficient angiogenesis, where you have stroke, heart disease, ulcers, other problems. So you want a balance, and so you want angiogenesis where you need it. Now, angiogenesis is good when you're growing, right? When you're growing from a fetus to an embryo to a fetus to a newborn to a child to an adult, you're growing, so you want new blood vessel growth to be occurring. Once you become an adult, you don't need that much more to be growing. Unless you're developing maybe some blockages of some of your blood vessels, then you want some new blood vessels called the collateral circulation to start developing to go around the blockage and develop that if possible. So angiogenesis is also necessary when you want to heal. So it's part of the inflammatory process. So things that get inflamed, you want new blood vessel growth to come in there and help it to heal. But you don't want that. We talked about chronic inflammation. So chronic inflammation is going to be adding on to angiogenesis. And that's why it's a basis for these heart disease and cancer and some of these other problems that you can have as far as our chronic diseases. Because inflammation is helping promote angiogenesis. So as you see here, there's a number of different compounds. The most common one is known as VEGF, vascular endothelial growth factor. And VEGF is elaborated. It's a substance that will stimulate the blood vessels to branch out and form new blood vessels towards whatever the source of the VEGF is. And so when it does that, you can see here that one of the things that happen is that you can have a small tumor, which is misspelled here. This is not my slide. So this is a small tumor here, which won't go very far if it's just isolated like that. However, what it does is it sends out these chemicals like VEGF, which then stimulate the blood vessel growth towards it. And once it links up with the tumor, then the tumor now has the ability to rapidly grow. So in its small state, this tumor is not a problem. But once it gets the blood supply, then it can grow. The other thing it can do is it can invade those blood vessels. And that's what causes metastasis. That's what causes the growth and spread of the cancer, not just locally, but to distant places. So that's how you can get colon cancer going to your liver, or lung cancer going to your brain. Okay, it goes through the blood. It goes through the bloodstream. Well, the bloodstream was generated by this tumor sucking in blood vessels to it to not only feed it, but giving it a mechanism to spread. So this just shows you a diagram that was done in the Dean Ornish's study in regards to VEGF, and his group was the intervention group, the blue, and the red was the non-intervention group, where they did nothing, just a standard American diet. And what you see here is that the levels of VEGF are much higher in the red non-intervention group, and the highest one here is in the blue, whereas most of them were down here. And VEGF, so you can see that there's much less angiogenesis stimulation from the intervention group, and his group was the whole food plant-based diet. Then you have anti-angiogenic factors like platelet factor 4 and heparinase. And you see now that, so not only did they have less VEGF, but they have more anti-angiogenic substances in their bodies. So there's something to be said about the benefits of a whole food plant-based diet in regards to angiogenesis. And then lastly, we have the microbiome. The microbiome is basically all of the bacteria that reside in your body, on or in your body. They're on your skin, they're in your nose, you're in your throat, they're in your intestinal tract, they're in the genital tract. And there are a large number of bacteria in your body. In fact, many different species, and everybody has just like your fingerprints are unique, you have a unique microbiome. No one else has a microbiome like you, because no one eats exactly like you do. No one has been to the exact same places as you. No one has mixed with the same people as you. You have your own unique microbiome that you've accumulated through the years. And you've fostered their growth. You've not fostered their growth. You may eat certain foods that promote a certain type of bacterial growth. You may eat foods that suppress a certain kind of bacterial growth. You may use disinfectant soaps or something like that on your body, on your skin, or you gargle with your mouthwash or whatever. So you will change the bacteria population. You may have taken a lot of antibiotics, so that's going to alter your microbiome. Well, just by sheer numbers, we think the number of body cells that you have is between 10 and 100 trillion cells. Well, the microbiome also consists of 10 to 100 trillion bacteria. So what does that mean? You're only half human. The other half is bacteria. So you are either half bacteria or half human. And if the numbers are a factor of 10, if they're skewed a little bit, and if you are only 10 trillion cells and you have 100 trillion bacteria, you are 90% bacteria. So you could be as good as 50% human or as little as 10% human, however you want to look at it. Most of these bacteria are housed in your colon. The great majority of these bacteria are in your colon, the large intestine. Okay? Your small intestine is supposed to be sterile, ideally, but most of the bacteria in your intestinal tract should be in the colon. So what do we know so far? Well, we know that what happens in the gut affects a lot of things, and the microbiome obviously is going to affect things in the gut primarily, such as irritable bowel, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease, colon cancer. But it also has been known to affect a lot of other things, even away from the intestinal tract, especially in regards to the brain. And we're just learning more and more about this. And there's a lot we don't know, but we're learning more and more all the time. And I'm happy to answer your questions about that. So as we look at all of these systems, we're going to kind of highlight a few things now, and that's in regards to what Dr. Furman came up with. Is called G-bombs. So if you don't remember anything else that I've been talking to you tonight or this afternoon, it's called G-bombs. And most people can remember that. I go, do you remember G-bombs? Oh yeah, I remember that. But then, okay, what does that stand for? So this is to help you remember the foods that are really high in helping good and helping immunity. So we looked at those 7 categories that we talked about, and we're going to look at G-bombs. So G stands for, what do you think G would stand for? Well, you guys have you read the book already? Okay, greens. All right, what are greens? Well, when we talk about greens, we're talking about the veggies primarily, okay? And the cruciferous vegetables are part of that, although not all cruciferous vegetables are green, but most of them are. The cruciferous vegetables are called cruciferous because crucifer means what? Cross, right. Means cross. And so the flowered leaf pattern on these vegetables is in the shape of a cross, and so they're called the cruciferous vegetables. So what are cruciferous vegetables? Arugula, bok choy, broccoli, broccolini, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, cauliflower, collards, kale, mustard greens. Those have the turnip, radishes, turnip greens, and watercress. All right, so those are the cruciferous vegetables, but all the greens are helpful here. Okay, and this shows the radishes, even though they're not green. I guess you can eat the green tops. All right, so what do the green vegetables do? Well, they do a number of things. How are we doing for time? Doing okay? So the greens, how do they stack up in these different categories? Well, first of all, they do help with the cellular component because they help enhance the activity of the cells involved with fighting infection. They also help with the dendritic cells. They stimulate those dendritic cells to be much more active in processing so that it strengthens your immune response. They are definitely anti-inflammatory. They have a lot of antioxidants. You'll see that in all of the color that they have in the rich green color. They promote DNA repair and protection, especially in helping carcinogens not attach so tightly to the DNA, but they also help in direct repair of the DNA. They are definitely angiogenic inhibitors, and of course, since they have fiber, they're going to alter and affect your microbiome effectively. All right, so you see the greens come in really good at all categories. What is the B? Beans, very good. Beans. All right, so you have all kinds of beans, all colors, shapes, sizes. Also known as, we try to expand that a little bit to include legumes. So beans, peas, legumes would be this category for G-bombs for the B. And so these are all different kinds of beans that you can find, even the string beans here. But you don't want these kind of beans. So how do the beans shape up? Well, they are anti-inflammatory, and they also have an antioxidants. They also are good at angiogenesis inhibition, and they also, since they're packed with fiber, beans, that legume family is the highest amount of fiber that you're going to get per gram or ounce or pound of food. So they will affect the microbiome very effectively. And they have phytates in there. I almost was tempted to put in the cellular component because they do affect cancer cells directly. The phytates in beans will prevent the function of cancer cells and spreading. All right, O, onions. Okay, O is for onions. So there's different kinds of onions. And in the onions, or the allium family, we'll call it, we also include garlic. So these are various kinds of the members of the family. And these, like the greens, which I forgot to mention the greens, because this is always reminds me of the fact, with greens, you need to chop, blend, shred, chew, grind, mince, dice. You need to get it chopped up. You need to break up those cell walls, because there's an enzyme in the cell walls that reacts with something that's inside the cell to form the isothiocyanates, which are to form the protective chemical that is beneficial in the greens. Well, the same thing in the allium family. There's this alliinase enzyme that needs to be released from the cell wall. So the only way you can get that released is you got to crunch it, grind it, grate it, shred it, blend it, whatever you need to do. You need to break up the cell wall so that this enzyme is released, reacts with the inside the cell compound to form the active ingredient, which will help you. And once you form that, then it's heat stable. But if you cook this first, especially if you overcook it, then you even though you grind it and chew it and everything like that afterwards, it's not much benefit to you. Okay. Now you get some by the time it gets down to your colon. You can have some bacteria that will do this enzyme reaction for you, but you've lost the majority of the benefit. So you want to give some time to blend, chop, and grind and do these things first before you cook them. All right, so what the onions have, they have an anti-inflammatory effect. They should actually, we should need to add this, Gene. Onions also should be in the antibodies because they also stimulate the dendritic cells to be a lot more active in the formation of antibodies and processing of antigens and foreign material. So they're also antioxidants, strong antioxidants, very good at DNA repair and protection. They also are anti-angiogenic, and because they're also a plant and have fiber, they're going to affect the microbiome. Did we get that? Somehow we missed the microbiome. Okay. Okay, M is for mushrooms. Somehow we missed that slide. How did we do that? Oh, okay. I see what happened. We missed the microbiome slide. All right, M is for mushrooms. How many mushrooms do you know? Shiitake, what? Button? What? Okay, chanterelle? Portobello? Trumpet? Okay. So, these are some mushrooms. And what was this? What was this one? Enoki? Enoki, these little cute things over here. So there's many different kinds of mushrooms. And interestingly enough, there's not really any particular advantage necessarily one over another. I mean, you've heard of reishi mushrooms and things like that, high immunity. Well, all of the mushrooms, even the common little button mushrooms, are pretty good. Some of them have a little advantages over the other, but it's pretty minor, especially if you get enough of the mushrooms. So mushrooms do a lot of things, which is fascinating. What they've been discovering with mushrooms. So mushrooms have an effect as far as on the cellular level. They also have an effect on the antibodies. If I get this, there we go. And then they also have effect on because they also affect the dendritic cells and the activity. They are anti-inflammatory. They have an antioxidant capacity. They are very good at DNA repair and protection. They inhibit blood vessel growth, new blood vessel growth in angiogenesis, and they affect the microbiome. So they say greens are the king of immunity, mushrooms are the queen. All right, what's the B? Oh, we don't have a blank slide for that, just for the B. Okay. I guess I'm supposed to ask that first before going on. So B is for berries, right? So these are a bunch of berries. And what we throw in there with the berry group are pomegranates. Pomegranates is berries too. So this is just kind of a depiction of most, not all. This is not an exhaustive list of all the berries. I'm sure you can come up with one that's not on here. But berries are very, as you can tell just from their color, right? Their color is so deep, so bright, vibrant, so intense that you know it's got to have good stuff in it, which it does. So berries have effects on the cells, particularly even directly on cancer cells. There's an acid, ellagic acid, that's in particularly black raspberries, but even all the berries, that is directly inhibited. It can be put on cancer cells, like particularly gastrointestinal cancer cells, esophageal cancer, stomach cancer cells, and actually kills the cancer cells just by direct contact, but not kill any of the normal cells. So berries have a nice strong cellular effect. They also have really good and anti-inflammatory, antioxidants, and actually I should put them also in the antibody because they also affect the dendritic cell activity as far as your immune response. They also help with DNA repair and protection. They are anti-angiogenic, and they also have a lot of fiber as well and affect the microbiome effectively. So berries are right up there. Berries are right up there. All right, what's the S? Seeds, right, seeds. You know, I think I'm going to add another thing to it, and we'll have to add, as you go along, the more you learn, the more you start, we left out this, we need to add that, you know. So S is for seeds and nuts are just hard-shelled seeds. So they're in the same family group. And these are a bunch of nuts and seeds here. So I don't know how many you can guess and pick out. So what do seeds do? Seeds also have a lot of properties. One is the anti-inflammatory properties. really high in antioxidants. They're particularly high in the vitamin E tocopherol family and selenium and those type of minerals that are antioxidants, potent antioxidants. They help with angiogenesis inhibition and also with the microbiome. But I think I'm going to add another one to the S's one of these days, about S2 or something like that. It'll be G-bombs, and probably for spices. Add things like turmeric and, other things. There's a whole world of that being learned about the value of certain spices and their effects on the immune system. So that's going to be, bring me back next year, we'll talk about spices or something like that. Okay, so how can we put this together? Well, you remember G-bombs, and if you think about that, you could actually put that in one dish. And our group, our besties group, the 5 of us, we call ourselves the besties, you can actually make a G-bomb salad. You can put all those things in there, right? You can put the greens, you can put the beans, you can put the onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds, nuts, and have a G-bomb salad. You can put it all together. In fact, the advantage of this is not to go whole hog and go like, oh man, mushrooms, man, that looks like I like mushrooms, or I don't like greens so much. I'm just going to eat mushrooms till I'm just, full of mushrooms. Or I'm going to eat greens until I turn green or something, and leave all the others out. The benefits are really when you mix them all. Okay, you mix them all. It's like if you're going to fight a war, do you want just the army? No. You want the army, the navy, the Marines, Air Force. I almost forgot that, and I was a veteran in the Air Force. The Air Force, you want them all, right? You want the whole, and then you want all the special forces and all the special forces in each of them, and so it just goes, you want as many fighting this as you can. You want the variety. You want everything helping each other. Each has a little bit of different function. Each has a different specialization, a little different expertise that they can bring, and that's the same thing with your diet. That different foods will bring different things literally to the table for you to be able to use, for your body to use. And so the more of these things that you can, and especially if you can blend them together in one meal, or one day, or 1 week, the better. So eat a large salad every day. Eat at least a half cup of serving of the legumes in soup or salad or another dish, like once a day. Eat at least 3 fresh fruits a day, especially the berries. And eat at least 1 ounce of raw nuts or seeds a day. And eat at least 1 large double-sized serving of green vegetables, raw, steamed, or in soups. Raw, like in a green smoothie. I love green smoothies, especially the way Flo makes them. All right, so basically you can take this information and just put it to practice. Pretty easy, right? What's the G stand for? Greens. The B? Beans. The O? Onions. M? Mushrooms. The other B? Berries. And this S? Seeds. See? That's all you need to know. All right? So you got it. And so if you just think about that, and as you usually before you go like, oh no, I don't like onions that much, I don't like mushrooms, put that, say, oh, you know what, they said, I heard that G-bombs thing, and that, that's really going to help my immune system. Like, okay, I'll, force it down. What's interesting, talking about greens being the king of immunity and mushrooms being the queen, that they studied mushrooms, and just people that took 10 grams of mushrooms a day, they were able to cut their breast cancer rates by 60-some%. But if they added it with green tea, so you have green tea every day with 10 grams of mushrooms a day, cut the breast cancer rate down by 89% in the premenopausal and 80% in the postmenopausal. That's powerful. That's huge. I mean, we don't need Susan B. Komen. Really, you need mushrooms and green tea. That's what you need. So you don't need pink ribbons. You need green tea and mushrooms, all right?